Genesis 1:11. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. So this part of the story has been staying with me. God doesn't create just one kind of plant. The land produces all kinds: trees, plants, seed-bearing growth, and each according to its kind. And from the beginning, there's variety, different forms, different rhythms, different ways of growing. Today, as we paint together, I want to share this project with you. We are going to be painting a cactus, which is a plant that grows differently than most and yet still blooms. I'm drawn to that image because I think many of us have learned to grow with a bit of protection. We've adapted to the environments we're given, and we've learned endurance, maybe even before softness. And still, there's beauty there. There's life here. There's growth here. This is the part of the creation story that helps me trust that God intended variety in growth, in timing, and in people. So, as you paint today, there's no need to measure your page against anyone else's. Just let what's growing here be what it is. Hello friends! Today we are going to be doing a little bit of drawing for our project, but not a lot. There are going to be some very simple shapes and I will guide you through how to do it. So it's going to be a good time. I'm going to start off by warming up on my scripture page. If you are new here, welcome. I'm really excited to have you here. And if you are not, well, thanks for coming back. I am just using a bit of water to add to my page, and then I'm going to drop in a bit of color just to give it a little bit more visual interest. Now, of course, if you do not want to paint or write out your scripture page, I do have a printable with different Bible translations of the same scripture, and I have, some that are more in like a script font, and then some that are a little bit more of the, just like a regular font. So you can decide which one you like more and use that. You can just glue it right in your journal instead of painting it in like this. And you can grab that by signing up at the link. I'm noticing it is hard for me to explain things and paint at the same time, unless I'm explaining about painting. Okay, focus, Crystal. Okay, so that link is just in the video description. And if you sign up through that, you'll get the projects sent to you earlier than everyone else. And then you'll also get the printable, so you can use that if you want. Okay, this is reminding me of cotton candy. It's kind of pretty. I like these colors. All right. Now, if you are new and you are wanting to paint in your your scripture page, it is kind of like a poem though, right? One thing to keep in mind is just being mindful of how much water you have on your page, just so that it doesn't get a little too out of control and spill onto the backside of the paper. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dry this, and then we'll get to drawing. Okay, let's go ahead and draw out this cactus. Now, a quick word about the cactus. I kept coming back to the idea of a cactus because it's a little bit more unlikely than, say, a big, beautiful sunflower or any other flower or trees and things like that. So please feel free, if you want to paint something else that speaks more to your heart, a different kind of plant, a flower, whatever, feel free to do that. This was something that I kept coming back to because sometimes I kind of feel like a cactus. I kind of feel like I put up walls and I feel like I need to protect myself. And yet, these plants are still beautiful, they still bloom, and I wanted to convey that in this week's lesson. So, we're going to start by making our main shape, okay? So, it just kind of looks like an oval shape that's wider on the top, narrower on the bottom. And I drew mine coming right from the bottom of the page, which means when I paint, I just have to be careful with the edge. So if you don't want to worry about that, you can scoot your drawing up higher. Just make sure you give yourself enough space for these bits here, okay? So I'm going to start, and I will definitely adjust as needed. And I'm trying to give myself a bit of space on this side because I know I want to add some to that. Let me make my pencil line a little darker so you can see it better. And I think what I'm going to do is bring it down there, okay? And I'm going to add another little oval shape coming out from this bit back behind. And I'm going to do an oval shape coming off of here. And notice how I've got a big, a medium, and a small. That just kind of helps to give a little bit more visual interest to the piece. So I will add this here. And then we've got these little blooms, and I've got these little bits that come up. They kind of look like a tall parentheses. And this is where the blooms are going to come out of. Except for this one right here, this main one, we've got the bloom that's bigger. And I've got it kind of tilted a bit. That's more just for convenience. I think technically it'd come right out of the center, but you know, we can change things up. We have artistic liberty to do so. And I'm just doing a soft curve shape. Okay, just right on the top there. And something that I just want to point out, especially for those of you who like to make your own paintings, I'm trying to vary the height of all of my elements, meaning I'm not having my flower, this flower, reach the same height as the top of here. So what happens is it allows your eye more time to wander, and it feels a little more dynamic or interesting when we vary the heights of things. So that's just a little art tip I could give you. This is all the information that we need in order to do our painting. Now, if you want to lighten your lines with a kneaded eraser, you can do so. I'm always hesitant to erase them too much because I want to make sure you can still see what's going on the camera. I think that you should still be able to see that well enough. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and spray my paints with some water. Just to get them ready. Now for all of the cactus bits, including these top parts right here, I just went ahead and I used a couple of different greens. So I grabbed Viridian, and I don't remember what this one's called. Oh, it's Emerald. And this one that's like more of a yellowy green. So you can decide what kinds of greens you want. And I'm going to save one green as like a darker green to add to the edges. So it'll make sense in a minute. I just wanted you to know that I'm grabbing a couple different greens. You can use whatever greens you have. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint this little bit here. And I can also create a variety of transparency by also painting with water. So we're doing a little bit of wet on wet. So that's when you paint with water and then you drop in your color. And also remembering this is going to dry lighter than what I put down. So I'll probably go over these areas just a couple of times here. And I can encourage some of those colors to mix, but I'm also trying not to rub everything back and forth into just one color, just because, you know, it's kind of nice to have that variety. And I'll just go right into this. I'm adding some water. And before I move on, I might switch my brush here. I'm going to grab my green that's a bit darker and just right underneath where this attaches, I'm just adding a little bit of paint, and I'll do a little bit of paint on the edge. If you did the beach scene, then it's very similar to how we added a little bit more darkness to the sand. Okay, so I'm just going to add a bit on the edge, maybe a little bit underneath there. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just show that these are different attachments versus like just one big massive lump of stuff, okay? And then I will just continue on my merry way, dropping in some color. Oh, I grabbed the wrong green. I'll clean my brush, grab a different one. And if we lose some of this darker green, it's okay. We're going to actually add even more shadow with some blue after it's dry. So I'm not too worried about it. Okay. Oh, I need to put my palette down. I'm going to switch to a round brush just because I want to. So I'm painting with that water. If you go outside the lines, that's totally fine and acceptable. And I switched to the round brush just because with the flat brush, I felt like the marks I was putting down, they just looked a little more square, and I wanted something that feels a little bit more organic for this particular project. So I can add some color. And then, you know, got to be careful when I get down to this bottom edge here. All right. Now, while it's wet, I'm going to add my darker green. So this, I'm going to just add a little bit more there. And then along the edge. These are just like little subtleties that I feel like it kind of helps bring everything together. And so you don't have to do them. In fact, you might not even see much of a difference, but I feel like they do. It does make a difference. Okay, I'm going to add a bit right over here because this is where our flower is going to rest, so there will be a little shadow. And then what I'm going to do is I'll pull some of the water that's here. I'm going to pull it into this bit and this little bit here. I can pull some of this water into that. I'm giving myself just like a little tiny gap on the bottom. You could also tape your paper off on the bottom with some painter's tape. But I obviously didn't do that. That would be another way to prevent the water from going where you don't want it to go. Okay, adding some more of these colors here and there. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush, and I'll grab that darker green again. And I'm going to just slide it right over here. Now I'm going to get, paint's going to go here and it's going to go here, and that's totally fine. And this just helps me, again, we're just adding these subtle little bits that will create more just division between all of the elements. Okay, and I looked at a lot of pictures of cacti before making this project, and you can do your flowers. Some colors that I saw were orange, I saw yellow, and I saw pink. Those were pretty popular colors. I decided that I would do a pink that has a little bit of orange, so it's a little bit corally. So I've just got a pink color here, and I can add a tiny bit of orange to that to give it that corally color, but you can use whatever color you want or mix up a color. All right, so I got to be careful because I tend to put my hand in wet paint. And I'm going to try really hard not to do that. I'm going to go over to the top. I've got a smaller brush, I've got a round brush, and what I'm trying to do is on these blooms here, they're not fully bloomed out, right? So they're a little bit smaller, and there is, let me grab a scrap paper actually to show you. Okay, so we're just going to make, it almost looks like a fork or something, okay? So a mark and a mark and a mark, just like that. So what I want you to notice is I have a gap in between each of these. Now if you want, you can fill it in more like this. Kind of looks like a tulip shape. That's totally fine, okay? Or if you want it closed up, you can paint something that looks more like that shape, okay? But I'm gonna go ahead and put that on the top. Now, I am okay with my flowers and blooms bleeding into my cactus a bit, as you can see here. If you don't like that look, you have to make sure that this is completely dry before you add any blooms. All right. And if you need to turn your paper, then you should do that. I'm just gonna not, for the purposes of the camera. All right. Okay, maybe something like that. And let's move on to the bigger bloom. Now this bigger bloom, I feel like it's a little bit trickier, okay? So this bloom is, this is a couple layers, okay? So don't expect it to look like this right away. I am using a round brush. I grabbed a bigger round brush just so that I can make my strokes a little bit wider. And my first layer is actually going to be a bit more watery. So I just added some water to that. And with our shape, you're going to follow, here, let me just do this here. Okay. So you have your U, and then you're going to do a stroke and a stroke and a stroke and up, okay? Just kind of like that, okay? And what I want you to notice on here is that I have some white space in between. So it's not just like a solid thing like this. There's more white space like down on the bottom. If you want to do it like that, you can. Okay, and then I can add a few couple little strokes that kind of indicate some of these petals that are back behind, okay? Don't worry if it doesn't look like mine, okay? If you want to kind of warm up, you can. And also, these are things that are organic in nature, and so they're not gonna look perfect, okay? So to get the thicker, wider strokes, I held my brush more like this on its side, okay? Push down and then let up is how you can get it thicker and then thinner. And then to do those petals back behind, I held it more straight up and down so I can use the tip of the brush to get a smaller stroke. Okay, so if you want to practice that, you totally can. You can do it. Now while it's wet, I think I might add a couple little drops of this orange because I think it's pretty. Okay, again, this is just my first layer. And then I'm going to move on to this other little bloom on the bottom. And it's very similar. It's kind of in between this one and that one. So it's just a little bit bigger, but these kind of strokes that come from a center point and then go out, trying to leave some white space here and there. Maybe I'll pop in a bit of orange, just subtle little things. Okay. Cool. Now I'm going to give this a super quick dry, and then we're going to do a few details, and then we're all done. All right, I've got a medium-ish brush here, and I'm going to add some shadows with a bit of blue. So I've just got some ultramarine blue, but you can use whatever blue that you like. So this blue's pretty strong. So just be ready to blend it out. So I'm going to add just a few shadows. So I'm going to put a little bit right underneath that flower, clean my brush, wipe it on my paper towel so it's wet but not soaking wet. Then I'm using the tip of the brush. I'm doing the brush wiggle, just wiggling my brush to kind of blend that blue out and to the side. So it's right underneath here and then just on the one side. Might add a bit more on this side here. Okay. Then I'm trying to show again that this is separate from this. So I'm going to add some blue underneath here, and then I'll add some blue. I'm grabbing just a bit to one side. Now, if you grab blue, let's see, and it's really strong, I'm trying to make it really strong, like stronger than you anticipated. I kind of like it, but let's say it was stronger than you wanted. You'll just do that same brush wiggle. Clean your brush, wipe it on the jar, kind of tap it on the paper towel, and then blend it out. The trick to this is like, don't stay too long. If you keep going, you'll end up kind of just working it too much, okay? All right, and then I'm going to do, okay, here's a good example. That's a lot of blue, okay? Clean my brush. That was more than I wanted. And I grabbed my brush and I'm just blending it down, okay? Kind of like some bright color now and again. I think it looks kind of fun. And it's okay if it's not like a perfectly straight line. Actually, I kind of like that, where it's not a perfectly straight and like it's not even all the way down. I think it looks nice. It looks interesting. I'll grab a tiny bit of blue to put right underneath here. shadow. Blend it out a little. And then we've got these pieces here. Okay, so we have blue. Put some on the side there. Blending it out. I think the trickiest bit with blending it out when you're first learning is like not having too much water on your brush. So kind of practice that. If you don't get it right away, like this, it's just something that takes a little bit of practice, and then soon you just have a sense for even how much brush and water you have on your brush. You'll just kind of know. All right, and then I definitely want to put a blue shadow over here so that we have a difference in the plane, right? So it doesn't look like it's just stuck together. It's quite bright, so I'm gonna just blend that out. Okay, might do like a little bit right here. Okay, now we just have a bit of texture and a few little dark marks. Let's do the dark marks on the blooms. So I'm going in with just the pink, but it's not as watery. And since I'm doing a second layer, it's gonna just pop a little bit more over the top of here. And what I'm doing is I'm doing similar strokes, but they're just shorter, okay? So this just it's kind of cheating. It's kind of making it look like it's more three-dimensional by just adding a bit more depth, darker color. Okay, and then I can do the same thing. There's not really a lot of space here. Maybe I could put pop a couple in there. And then I can do the same thing here. And then we've got our marks. So I've got a raw umber color. You can use any kind of brown that you might have. And what I'm gonna do is I am just going to, on the cactus, do some dots. Notice my paint isn't that watery, and that just helps me to have more control over the shape that I'm making. Also, if your painting is wet, then all of this will just kind of fuzz out. So I'm assuming if you're on this step, your painting is dry enough to do this, but maybe if you have some shadow bits that are still wet, you might want to be careful with that. Okay. And don't try to think too hard about where you put your dots. Just kind of put them down. Now from here, we're going to do a marks along the edge, and they're just little V's coming off of the cactus. So if you want to, you can also switch to a colored pencil to get these little V's. And they're just going to go all along the edge. And then you can also put some coming out of these little dots. And you can have the V's going different directions just to show that they're coming out different directions. So all of the cactus bits will have this, not the part that, I mean, I guess the whole thing is a cactus, but these bits right here where the blooms come out of, those won't have them. And notice, like, if your V's aren't attaching perfectly, it's not a big deal. I promise. I promise. If you need to grab a tinier brush, then do that. But I'm just trying to use more of the tip of the brush to get to the point. But again, if you are more comfortable with a smaller brush or using a sharp colored pencil, that's totally acceptable. Okay. And this part, it's kind of nice to slow down and do something that's a little bit more like rhythmic. It's just literally the same stroke over and over and over again. I think it's fun anyways. Now right here, it gets a little complex. This is behind, so technically there would be, you'd see little bits over here, but you probably can't see much because the shadow's there. I'm gonna add them anyway. Why not? We're already here, right? Might as well. Again, to try to get these lines to really show, just make sure you don't have tons of water on your brush. Otherwise you kind of lose the shape. And then yeah, just add a few little lines here and there for the spines, I think is what they're called. I can never remember. And you don't have to do every single dot either. Like just adding a few here and there is enough of an indication that we get the point, right? We get the point, get it? Anyways, I had a lot of fun painting this with you. Thank you so much for joining me. As you finish up today, I want to leave you with one thought. We live in a world that constantly invites comparison, our pace, our progress, our work, and our growth. But in the creation story, God doesn't weigh one plant against another. A cactus isn't more valuable than a peony or a primrose or a poppy. A tree that grows slowly isn't of less value than one that grows quickly. They're different, and that difference was intended. Sometimes we may use comparison to motivate us. However, what I found is it actually interrupts the way we're being grown. So, if you notice yourself measuring today, your page, your process, your life, see if you can let that go just for a moment. Trust that what's growing in you is being tended with care, according to its kind, in its own time. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.